rather than just, sit and make pronouncements about what is halal, what is haram, right? It helps to make Islam more accessible. So, an expansion of the marketplace of ideas. There's also something going on, I think, that we might call genre blurring, which is related to this. And by genre blurring, I mean that, if you think of talking with and hearing the expertise of a traditionally trained religious scholar, you generally expect that person to look a certain way, perhaps, to talk a certain way, to have a certain format and style to their discourse. And what we're seeing today in many online spaces is a move away from that, a blurring of the boundaries between different types of programming and talk. On the slide here, we see the image of a very well-known and quite popular online imam based in Birmingham in the United Kingdom, named Mufti Abu Layth. And if you look at the picture from there, if you can see it, yes, he sat in front of a bookcase full of, classical religious texts, but he's wearing a t-shirt, and he's got big muscly arms, and his hair has got like hair gel, and he looks like a bro. He's cool, right? That's Mufti Abu Layth. And when you listen to his videos, he's laughing most of the time, making bad jokes, and then laughing at his own bad jokes. But I mean, he's a classically trained Maliki faqih. He's studied in the Middle East and other centers of Islamic learning. He has the credentials, but when you listen to him talk, he sounds more like someone you would meet down at the fitness center, at the gym. And he does. He's well built. He works out every day, so he has these big muscles. And he's actually taken some criticism from traditional religious scholars who said, you're insulting Islam by showing up with this tight t-shirt and the big muscles, and right? And he said, no. I'm just being actually more honest than you. With me, you get what you see. I don't live my life one way, and then when I'm being Islamic, I become all pious, right? I said, no. If you meet me down at the gym, I talk this way, and when you meet me on my online masjid, I look and I speak the same way. So, what's happening here when you watch the videos of Mufti Abu Layth? Are you engaging in the study of religion? Are you engaged in classical Islamic education, or are you just hanging out with your bro? Both are going on at the same time. And his argument is that he's actually more effective because he's adopted this vernacular style that will be instantly recognizable to particularly young South Asian men who live in the British Midlands. They'll immediately see him as someone who is part of their world, thinks like them, talks like them, and he'll be actually able to provide them with a contextualization of Islam that makes sense to their lives. And I think all of this is kind of part and parcel of what I would suggest is a broader integration of Islam with neoliberal, that is market-oriented lifestyles and ways of being, right? If I had to kind of provide a master analysis of what's going on here, a sort of meta-analysis of it, it's not so much about the internet and digital Islam reshaping Muslims. It's more about the hegemony and the dominance of structures of society that are increasingly shaped by neoliberal economic market forces aimed at consumption, certain forms of entertainment, certain forms of leisure. There's a certain type of subjectivity that is created by liberalism. And so I want to suggest to you that at the broadest level, we should understand many of the trends that we're seeing today as a product of the interaction between the neoliberal market-oriented influences on Islam and Muslims, many of which intersect with and are enabled by new media and information technologies in important ways. But we want to ask the question: is religion, is Islam shaping what's going on online, or is the online shaping Islam? What's the direction of causality here? This is a question that has been present in the broader study of the digital humanities. I think we can also see in digital Islam a certain kind of response to a crisis of authority and authenticity. And this now, for a moment, I want to reflect on the ways in which media Islam, digital Islam, interacts with broader trends, particularly among Muslim youth in the world today. We've seen today, I think it's fair to say, on a global level, a parallel, simultaneous upsurge in interest in Sufism and Salafism at the same time, right? And in theory, those two things shouldn't work together very well, right? Because in theory, Salafis don't like Sufis and vice versa. If you want to go with a sort of stereotypical understanding. Actually, I think this double rise of the two trends makes a lot of sense, because they both provide solutions to the same problem. I think particularly young people today, young Muslims who are searching for answers about religion, they go online, they ask a question to Sheikh Google. Ya Sheikh Google. And they get 3,000 answers. And all of the answers are contradictory, and they say different things. And all of the answers look correct, because all of the answers cite Quran and Hadith and the authority of Imam so-and-so and Sheikh so-and-so. And how do you know? How do you know which is correct? The temptation is what? The temptation is just to choose the one you want. Choose the answer you prefer. You feel a little bit guilty because, maybe you're letting your desires get in the way. So how can you find something true and authentic? How do you navigate that problem? I think one of the reasons that young people are drawn towards Salafism today is actually because it is able to represent itself as a grounded, authentic expression of Islam that is rooted in the early period of the religion and has specific boundaries around how it's interpreted. Likewise, in Sufism, given the sort of centrality of the relationship between Sheikh and Murid in Sufism, you're given a compass, something to follow. Right? You're not just swimming in this ocean of online information about religion. You have an actual reference point. And so I think, interestingly enough, one can also make the case that the rise of digital Islam has also helped to reinvigorate and revitalize interest in what we might call more traditional engagements with religion. I'm conscious of time, so let me try to move quite quickly through these last couple of slides. I've been very interested in particular on the impact of new media and technology on Islamic law and the mechanisms and modalities by which we do fiqh and jurisprudence. There's a recent book by the American scholar of religion, Rumi Ahmed, called Sharia Compliant, a user's guide to hacking Islamic law. Now, by hacking here, he doesn't mean like online hackers who break into computer systems and steal things. he's using hacking in the more general sense of innovative and creative techniques and modes of expression to solve problems. And he's making the argument that in one chapter of the book, that online spaces have been very important as laboratories in which people can begin to explore possible different interpretations of Islamic law around sensitive and controversial issues, to kind of test some new ideas and get responses from different audiences, and then to refine further and develop further in order to come up with some formula that perhaps might begin to be adopted more widely within communities and societies. So he makes the argument that online spaces, with respect to debates about Islamic law, online spaces have been important because he argues, based on the evidence in his book, that some changes with respect to debates on Islamic law and personal status and family issues in the United States and Europe, for example, changes that have now become quite broadly accepted, first appeared in debates in online spaces 10 years ago, and then gradually moved from the online experimental laboratory into mainstream conversation, and eventually to something like normative consensus. So he wants to say that these spaces are important as experimental, areas of experimental talk. We're also seeing entirely new modes and genres of dispensing jurisprudence. On the lower right here, you'll see a picture of a very well-known American imam named Suhaib Webb, an Azhari-trained scholar. So he has the appropriate ijazas. He has spent years living and studying in the Middle East. And he began to use the online, the app Snapchat to dispense what he called snapwas. Instead of fatwas, snapwas, where you could ask him a question, and then he would record himself giving you a fatwa of 8 seconds long. Very convenient, right? You can just ask Imam Suhaib, and so he's not sitting there, he's not taking 20 minutes, 30 minutes to narrate the chain of authority which allows him to make a particular pronouncement. He gives a very quick thing, which, because of who he is grounded in Islamic law. And again, look at the guy. Baseball cap. When you listen to him talk, he can move in 5 seconds between sounding like, this dude who lives on the streets of New York, and then he can suddenly change into this classically trained classical Islamic scholar and move back and forth between both modes very quickly. And one can think of this, you push this model to its logical extent, and you can imagine an entire social media platform for Islamic law, where people can pose questions, and you know that it will be, it can be posed to a group of scholars that have been vetted in terms of the credentials they possess. You can maybe even choose your preference for which madhab. If you're Maliki, you can request that you have a response from a Maliki scholar, and you can, and so all of the other elements of social media interaction, liking it, not liking it, subscribe, unsubscribe, right? This would all be built into the system. I have a friend who's actually a pioneer in the area of developing Islamic software named Shahid Amanullah, who's working on such a system now, which he calls Quick Fiqh. Other thinkers and observers have also postulated about the idea of approaching Islamic law in the same spirit as the open source software movement you may be familiar with, right? Operating systems like Linux, where no company owns the code. It's available to anyone. No one has a proprietary hold over it. And anyone is able to take it and work with it and add things to it, so long as you share with everyone else. And he's asking, what happens if you take that same ethos and transport it to Islamic law? No one owns Islamic law, which seems consistent with the way that Islam is structured as a religion. Certainly in its Sunni, there is no centralized point of authority in the Muslim world. We have schools of thought, we have sort of enormous historical equities built into them. But he's saying, what happens if we approach and think about Islamic law according to the same framework that we think of for software development? Finally, how should we think about potential futures for digital Islam? Well, most of the study and analysis and scholarship on digital Islam to date has really been about something that would be better described as Islam online. Right? It's mainly about what happens when we're able to access and work with texts and the kind of traditional ways of working with religious knowledge. What happens when imams show up online? You know, what happens to the audiences? How are they regarded? I think that's a rather constraining way of thinking about digital Islam. I think we need to think about digital Islam as something potentially much more transformative. Right? We need to think in terms of the difference between religion online, which means taking the existing texts and structures and authority figures and simply moving them online. The difference between that and online religion. Right? The idea that doing religion via and mediated by digital technologies might potentially have much more fundamental impact, transformative impact on the category of religion itself. So, you know, what I want to say is that part of the study of Islam should also be analysis of the ways in which things like augmented and virtual reality interact with the ritualistic dimensions of religion. I think augmented reality in particular. So I feel pretty confident that within the next decade or so, and frankly I will welcome this, because I mean, how often do you walk around and everyone you know is just simply standing there looking at their phones? Okay, hello? Hello? Person, are you there? Just a second. Right? We disappear from society. In 10 years, let's say we're all wearing glasses, right? And our information feeds are coming up, but we're looking out at the world and seeing information projected onto the world that we're seeing, right? So you see the world, you see your friend, but you're also seeing information related to what you're seeing in real life at the same time. Think potentially the impact of that on those aspects of religiosity that involve physical interaction with the world, the use of your body in various ways, the ritualistic dimensions of this. You know, think of a cyber Sufism, for example, in which online, or rather virtual realities, you know, become understood as a particular way and method of encountering and having a relationship with the divine. Think of blockchain technology. Many of you will know about Bitcoin, right? You've heard of Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies. Now, think of the implications of that. Think of what if blockchain had been available during the early centuries of hadith collection. Right? What has been one of the greatest challenges of the science of hadith, right? It's ascertaining the quality and the veracity, the authenticity of the narration of the prophet, right? And so we have these isnad, the chain of transmission. And you know, you have to look at each person in it to know, well, can we trust that person? What do we know about them? Is this an honest person? The whole point of blockchain technology is that each hadith could be signed, and its authenticity would be, every hadith would contain a chain of authentic signings that allow you to directly and safely trace that saying directly back to the Prophet himself. Now, we're past, obviously, the time when hadith collections were going, but questions about the authenticity of pieces of information that we encounter continue to be a problem. You know, to what extent might blockchain technologies actually help to deal with some of these concerns about the correctness and authenticity of religious knowledge? There are people playing with the ideas of Muslim cryptocurrencies, right? So cryptocurrencies, there's already been some theft on this. Sort of, is the concept Islamic or not? This debate has happened, and we're starting to see now the emergence of cryptocurrencies that present themselves as the first Sharia-compliant cryptocurrencies that are to be used specifically for Sharia-compliant transactions of various sorts. And I think even more interestingly is the rise of the fields of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the whole set of ethical debates that are already happening around artificial intelligence, where more and more aspects of our lives are governed by algorithms. The ways in which data is collected about us and passed on and sold and transmitted, and how should we think about that in terms of issues of privacy and social propriety. So, you know, at some point we're going to start having questions and debates about halal algorithms. You know, what is it that makes a particular set of computational instructions about how information should be gathered about people and handled, and the uses to which it should be put? When will debates about Islamic ethics come to structure those kinds of questions? So, these are the kind of thoughts and ideas that I wanted to share with you today. I don't know, Heidi, if we have a few minutes left for questions. Great. There is one thing I wanted to do, though, if you'll allow me. Since this is the Digital Islam Conference, I wanted to get a selfie with all of you.
Thank you very much, Mr. for entertaining us with your enlightening presentation. Yes, you know, in the first part of your presentation, you talked about early prediction on digital Islam, and you know, scholars on digital Islam predicted that the expansion of technology will sort of democratize religious knowledge and also play a role in fragmenting religious authority. There is no longer, like, you know, central authority that can control the interpretation of religious symbols and doctrine. So, with this context, there is democratization in Islamic knowledge and also practices. But in your presentation, you also provide us with data, with analysis, and somehow you suggested that the result of the expansion of the digital technology is not simple as scholars had earlier predicted. There are sort of paradoxical consequences of the digital Islam. On one hand, the digital Islam indeed has democratized the way we think about our religion and we practice our religion. Yes, you know, you talk when Muslims today, especially the younger generation, you know, when they go to online media and they pick up a different aspect of Islam. One aspect from Sufism, one aspect from Salafism probably, one aspect from Hadith, from any other thing, and they mix up together and they practice this kind of hybrid cultural religion, right? But at the same time, also you suggested that actually the digital Islam has revitalized the traditional religion, Salafism and Sufism, because it provides sort of more certain, more secure religion, yes, white and black interpretation of religion. So people today, because they are feeling insecure with the rapid change as a result of globalization, some of them want to return to the more secure, the more certain interpretation of religion. So this is sort of paradoxical consequences of the digital Islam. Very good, thank you very much. I think we have like 10 minutes, 15 minutes for a question and answer. And you can raise your questions in English or in Arabic, because Peter was born in Saudi Arabia into a family of he's a diplomat, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. We are hopeless. We are family. Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. I speak Arabic. Yeah. Okay. No problem. Otherwise, we will translate. Okay. I think 3-4 questions. 2 questions probably from this side and this. Yeah. One you and then Ibu Arnis and Lina Panas. Probably you. So gender balance. 2 male and 2 female. We will start. Let's see questions. Please, anybody would deliver microphone? Okay. Nina, you can start.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nina Nurmila. I am a professor at the State Islamic University, Universitas Islam Negeri Bandung. Thank you very much for your very interesting lecture, especially about this examples, 2 examples of the new style of imam, the casual types of imam, because this is very different from Indonesian ulama who tend to keep their appearance nicely, like adopting like Pakistani, Indian, Chinese styles, thinking that it is Arabian and Islamic style of dress. And my question is about these 2 casual types of imam, about the acceptance and rejection of the ummah on that kind of style of imams, or if this imam is being accepted, which group tend to accept these types of imam, and if they are being rejected, which group tend to reject these 2 casual styles of imam. And the second question is, I'm wondering about whether they can be categorized as conservative or progressive imam in their thinking, especially on women and gender issues. Thank you very much.
Okay. Because he is Commissioner of Human Rights for women. Yeah. Okay, you. Oh yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Ibu Arnis.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arnis. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm so fascinated by what you has just referred. So I'm interested in how young people are curating their own religious identity through online. And as we also know that how algorithm works, how the hashtag and the power of keyword can actually just confirm our own bias, right? And with those young people who have very limited training or knowledge of religion, they will just consume whatever available on their Google results, all right? So my question is how, and for instance, there's gonna be very easy tendency to go into that conservative Muslim because the content creators are really good. If I search particular keyword on Pinterest, on Instagram, on YouTube, they tend to suggest the similar videos from their ustad. So the challenge is how can, in relation to the moderate Islam, how is it the challenge for the moderate Islams to also compete in online world to provide that kind of moderate thought of Islam? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, you will be the last.
I am Jazir from Sri Lanka. My question is, in your presentation, you argue that to present Islam, to communicate Islam, we can say digital Islam. How far it is appropriate to term digital Islam using the modern technology to present Islam? This is my one question.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, digitalization is one of the tactics to present or communicate Islam. So how far it is appropriate to term digital Islam? Another question, what is the impact of the digitalization in Islamic scholarship rather than communicating or presenting Islam?
Yes, thank you very much. Last. Yes. Microphone over there.
Okay, thank you for your insightful presentations. My name is Nazif. I'm a student of Communication Science from the University of Mercubuana, Yogyakarta. I'm confused that if we see to the sociologists or the political scientists, we know that they have very well addressed in addressing these digital disruptions. I want to ask to you, is it possible for the Islamic studies to not trap it in the paradigms of utopia or dystopia in the philosophy of technology? Because we know that the technology itself is something very dichotomous paradigms like that. Is it possible for us to project any features of Islam in the complementarian paradigm? Thank you.
Yes. For you. 5-10 minutes for you.
Thank you all very much. These are incredibly rich questions, and so maybe I can take 6 hours just to respond, just to share some ideas. There was a question about the acceptance of casual imams, and also whether we can think about this style as being more associated with progressive or conservative orientations. The appearance of these casual imams, as you can imagine, has been very controversial in some circles. And I think part of it is because the more traditional religious experts feel somewhat threatened by these people, because they're able to look at the audience numbers and they see young people moving over towards the casual option, you know, and so their initial response is usually to say, you know, these casual imams are insulting the religion. Their adab is bad. Everything, you know, it's unsafe to follow them. But unfortunately, the market seems to speak for itself, and in some cases you've seen more traditional figures have to adapt to the realities that they have to change aspects of their own approach if they want to maintain the audience numbers. This is not just like this Mufti Abu Layth guy, but the whole genre of the appearance of figures like Amr Khalid in Egypt and Aigim here. When Amr Khalid came out, you know, he was attacked by the scholars of Al-Azhar University on the one hand, and by figures attached to the Muslim Brotherhood in the other, because he was stealing audience from both of them, right? And so this has created a politics around them. But my sense is that the trend is on the side of those who are taking on these new styles and formats, because that's where the demand is. That's what young people in particular seem to want to consume. And the most successful of these casual imams, I think it's important to note, are people who have classically trained education. They have the correct credentials. They're not just casual lay people who have no formal grounding in religion. You can't question their actual ability to work with Islamic law, for example. And so they have the power and the authority of the classical Islamic sciences articulated through this more casual, friendly format. And that's a very powerful formula. And so, you know, what yes, I'm interested in watching their voices emerge, but I'm also interested in watching the more traditional figures have to respond to this new reality. Is it progressive or conservative? It's both. It's everything. So with respect to the Salafi trend, for example, among Muslims in North America and Europe, there's this online academy, Islamic academy, called the Al-Maghrib Institute, which offers short online courses and weekend retreats, executive-style education. All of their religious scholars come from the Salafi current. You know, many of them have studied at the Islamic University in Medina, for example, but to look at them, they look more of the casual style, right? So one of them, and they sell themselves in that way. If you look at the biography of one of them, for example, he explains that he used to be the singer in a punk rock band, but then he decided to change his life, and he went to Medina, and he studied, and now he's an alim, but he also likes to snowboard and skateboard, and it's okay to do that. You can be a Salafi and have fun, right? And so this is part of why this is so popular. When it comes to issues with respect to women, for example, they are still actually very conservative in most regards. The people with this and Maghrib Institute, they're Salafis. So you know you actually get that Salafi position, but it's articulated and explained, you know, in a different manner. Others like Suhaib Webb, the one who does the sort of short fatwas, he's an Azhari trained scholar, but he's worked very hard to recognize that in a context such as the United States, most young Muslims in the United States, according to opinion polls, support same-sex marriage. That's where the community is. And so he's someone who has tried to find a way to navigate between prevailing social attitudes and the teachings of religion through very creative use of jurisprudential works. And so I think there's, particularly with regard to questions of family and women, there's some very creative, innovative work going on in these online spaces. How can modern Islam compete when we have online spaces that often will track people and confine them into very narrow and rigid approaches? This is a very important question. We've seen it debated a lot in the context of the online recruitment and radicalization efforts of groups like AICIS, for example. But even putting the violent extremist phenomenon aside, I think there's this broader challenge that because of the way the underlying algorithms of online search platforms are built, it means that one easily, once you begin watching one channel, you fall down into a deeper layer of that same trend, and you go down from there. So I think this is precisely why we see a crisis that's been recognized and is being debated within policy circles, where experts, policymakers, and the representatives of the major online platforms are sitting together to try and figure out how to do this. Because the platforms, of course, want to try to maintain the idea that they are neutral, right? But we know in practice that it doesn't work that way. And so this is precisely why you know, we have to have interesting debates and discussions about about the algorithms themselves. This gets down to the level of code, right? And so I think this is where, I threw out this notion of halal algorithms, right? Now, I don't know who would be responsible for identifying and certifying the halalness of a given algorithm, but I think it is possible to think and talk and reflect in the area of coding and the development and design of the underlying systems, mechanisms for ensuring that at the very least we're getting a diversity of perspectives that are offered. Again, this is something where the coders and the technology specialists need to be in touch with the specialists in Islamic studies and those who understand the context of content. And I think this is the future, the coming together of those two communities. We're running out of time, aren't we? Yes, okay. The boundaries of digital Islam. Yeah, I mean, it's not just about digitizing texts. I'm trying to suggest that we should be thinking of digital Islam as meaning the intersection, the encounter, the coming together of digital technologies of all kinds and Islamic thought and practice. So it's not just scanning texts and making them available online. It's not just about new kinds of imams. It's potentially about the way that technology transforms how we think and do religion, transforms religious experience more fundamentally. But again, there are potentially downsides to that. This book by Hussein Kasbani, for example, that new book on Follow Me, Akhi, he has an example where there's these two guys living in London who have been attending a mosque for Jummah prayer where the khutbah is always given in Urdu. They don't speak Urdu. The imam who gives it has been imported from Pakistan for 6 months at a time. And he speaks and they don't understand a thing. They feel completely alienated from the mosque. So they decided to create their own customized Jummah experience. And the two of them go to their apartment and they start by finding online on YouTube some video that engages religion in a way that helps them feel like better people and more spiritual. And then they perform their prayer together. So how should we think about that in terms of Islamic proprietary and Islamic norms? On the one hand, it's good that this customized private Jummah actually keeps them engaged with religion. Because before they were not going to mosque anymore because they couldn't engage in any way. So on the one hand, the technology keeps them in their deen. But on the other hand, we know historically that the maqasid behind Jummah, the purpose of it is community, to bring people together. Right? So on the one hand, they're staying with religion, but they're losing the social aspect of it, the coming together, the meeting of other people. So it has these two sides to it. There was a very interesting question about possible futures for Islam online. I think in the interest of time, I should probably wrap up. I've tried to share some basic ideas about that, but I would love to talk with you afterwards in more detail. Thank you very much.
I believe there are still many more questions to raise. We can continue our dedication for another 2 hours. That time is limited, and we will have another session, quite interesting session. Special panel 1 and special panel 2 here in this one, in this room, special panel 1, with 4 scholars, researchers, Gireban, Omar Riyad, Nailan, and Fatima Hussein, and will be moderated by Muhammad. We have to give big applause to Peter Mandaville. Yeah. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. appreciation, the token of appreciation.
Ramen boleh pinjam sebentar. Sebagian.
Oke, sekarang kita akan masuk ke special panel 1 dan 2. Special panel 1 will be in this room with Bu Amelia Fauzia, and the special panel 2 with saya forget special panel. Saya jadi berubah. Okay, Bu Yuli Yasin, that's in another room, that's in Sleepy and Menteng. That's the room when you have registrations. Jadi sekarang spesial panel 1 di sini, spesial panel 2 ada di ruang Sleepy Menteng, ruang registrasi kemarin. Di sini bersama Bu Amelia Fauzia, dan di panel sana bersama Bu Yuli Yasin. Saya lupa pembicaranya. Oke, sebentar saya bisa. Yes. Aman. Oke, baik. Sekarang, yes, for special panel 1, Islam in the Digital Age, will be chaired by Bu Amelia Fauzia. We'll have Professor Gary Poon, Pam Nailan, Omar Raya, and Fatimah Hussein in this room. And for special panel 2, Islamic Philosophy for Millennials, will be chaired by Yuli Yasin. And we have 4 speakers: Abdul Majid Hakimullahi from AICIS London, Abdul Aziz Abbasi, Al Mustafa International University of Qom, and Khalid Al-Walid dan Amar Fauzi from STFI Sadra Diakara Jakarta. Monggo, persilakan. Ya. Mas, kita naikin sendiri aja ke sini. Ya, naikkan semua.
Iya, yang itu ya.
Apa kabar Pak Dekan? Kalau nggak disapa, kalau reuni.
Oke, Bapak Ibu, monggo dipersilakan mengisi kursi yang sudah ada. Kalau masih sudah tidak penuh, sudah penuh kursinya, mungkin bisa bergeser ke ruang Sleepy dan Menteng untuk mengikuti SP2. Monggo, untuk selanjutnya sesi saya persilahkan ke Bu Amelia Fauzia. Let me invite Bu Amelia to chair the session, please. 3, 4,